Hi everyone, Richard here. In this video I'm going to put forward a possible geometry for Raphael's The Deposition of Christ. The geometry fit here is a stretch, I do admit, but it continues the pattern of a geometry based on a pentagon, pentagram, circle that appears to fit the composition of the painting, then using geometry extends out to establish the painting's proportions. The geometry here is complicated, but stay with me. Raphael's Deposition of Christ, painted in 1507, and quite large, 184 by 176 centimeters, or 72 by 69 inches, is one of his paintings that to me almost screams a geometry underpinning. The composition is complex, with apparent lines running in every which way, such as here, running down the body of Christ, or here, running through his upper body and head the head of the man on the left who carries him, and here through his lower body and legs, and another here running along the back of Mary Magdalene's head and the arm of the woman in the lower right supporting the Virgin Mary, another here along the top of Mary Magdalene's head and the hills in the background up the Calvary Hill. As well, vertical lines can be placed through the legs of the men carrying Christ, and a horizontal line at the horizon. But most obvious would be a line running along the arm of the man on the right who carries Christ's body, like this, perhaps running from corner to corner, or this, a 45-degree angle line, or visually, to me, running along the face and arm like this, and another parallel to that last line, running through St. John's face and along Christ's upper right arm. And there are more and more. Many of these lines do almost form a circle centered on Mary Magdalene, and that circle is centered left to right on Christ and the figures around him, those figures having been worked out in this beautiful preliminary drawing. But if there's a geometry that holds all this together, a big if, I do understand, one that might help explain some of Raphael's thinking, what is it? Through several of these videos, I've shown an apparent connection between Raphael's paintings and a geometry starting from a pentagon, pentagram, circle, single, like this, or double. So does that geometry fit this painting in any real way? Centering it on the painting, it does nearly match a few lines, most notably the two at the sides, and one following the body of Christ. But the most significant lines, the one along the head and arm of the man on the right carrying Christ, and the line parallel to that through St. John's head and along Christ's upper arm, are missing, unless new lines are drawn, here in the geometry. If instead the geometry is turned on its side and made smaller, so that the left side of the pentagon aligns with the left side of the painting, the top of the circle aligns with the top, and the now vertical side of the pentagram is in the center, left to right, the geometry matches those two important diagonal lines, as well as the line running down the faces of Christ and the man on the left carrying him, and down along Christ's body, and the line running along Christ's legs. And, interestingly, that small circle, centered on Mary Magdalene, is nearly in the center of the geometry. But what I found even more interesting, and possibly telling, is that when I scaled that preliminary drawing so that it lined up with the painting, it fit the geometry perfectly from side to side. Wow! And with Mary Magdalene's head even more centered in the central circle. It does beg the question, did Raphael use this pentagon, pentagram, circle geometry as a guide for the drawing, then use geometry to figure out the proportions of the painting? If so, it would have been fairly straightforward. With this geometry aligned in this way, with the side of the pentagram in the center, the placement of the right side would be obvious, both sides equidistant from the center. But the right side can also be found geometrically in another interesting way. If a horizontal line, drawn through the bottom 2 points where the pentagons and pentagrams meet the circle, and extended to the right like this, it meets the upper right side of the pentagon, extended down to the right at the right edge of the painting. With the left side of the pentagram, this forms an isosceles triangle, the top sides being of equal length. Then, this bottom side of the pentagon can be extended down and to the right. A mirroring line can be drawn in the other direction, exactly touching the circle on its way. We've seen that unusual bit of geometry now several times. A line drawn where these 2 diagonals touch the sides forms the bottom, finishing a rectangle that matches the proportions of the painting. So am I on to something with this one? I'm not entirely sure. But I said at the beginning, it does follow the pattern, a geometry based on a pentagon, pentagram, circle that appears to fit the composition of the painting, then using geometry, extends out to establish the painting's proportions. I find it significant that so many Raphael paintings appear to have an obvious relationship to geometry in this way. And there are even more that I've found that appear to have that same relationship, but that I have yet to fully explore. But I think it's time for a change of pace. For my next video, I'll move on to someone else. Perhaps the Dutch painter from the Northern Renaissance, Roger van der Weyden. His Descent from the Cross has long been a huge favorite of mine, and another that screams a geometric underpinning. Though, if it's there, it remains somewhat elusive to me. Stay tuned. For more information on my own work, please visit my website at rtdavis.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Richard Thomas Davis Artist. Thanks for joining me.